my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my fancy booktube hats, and I've got my fancy fairy wings on because this is a very important book recommendations video. I have been in the process of planning a hyper-specific book recommendations video that has been in the works, that is still in the works. But in order to do that, I did ask the community here on YouTube and on my other social medias for hyper-specific recommendation requests for my hyper-specific book recs video. But one of the requests I have gotten so far stood out to me as being so on brand for me and my booktube channel and my reading taste that it not only deserved, it demanded to be its own recommendations video. This is the comment. It's from Anna Marie at Actual Spinster, and it reads, "A book with fairies that are actually interesting and not a romantasy." Big mood. Now, I'm not here to dunk on romantasy. My feelings about romantasy as a marketing term could be the subject of a whole other video. What is relevant to this video is that I don't think there's any real consensus on what romantasy means. And of course, the flip side of that coin is that it's very hard to define what isn't romantasy. So I've taken a fairly strict approach here to narrow down a list of books. None of these, as far as I can remember or am aware, have a central romance plot in them at all. This helped me narrow down the list. It had the side effect of meaning that these skew a little more heavily towards middle grade and YA titles. That also means I've left out a lot of books that lots of people would probably reasonably say aren't romantasy because the romance is like a subplot. It also means I've left out authors like Juliette Marillier, who I think is a really important author of fae folklore-inspired fantasy. Most of what she writes is historical Celtic fantasy. Most of her books have a central romance, but you would not be romancing with the fae in her books. You'd be romancing with the human, and the fae are also there. But even without any of those books, this is still a fairly long list. So here, by popular demand, is the Fancy Hat Lady Reads Great Unsexy Fairies Book Recommendations video of 2026. Oh no, my wing strap has snapped. I shall have lopsided wings for the rest of the video. However will I cope? Now, the first book I want to give a shout out to is my current read, even though I have not finished it, and that is Greenteeth by Molly O'Neill. I want to mention this because, what a wonderful coincidence that when I was planning this video, I happened to also start reading a book that I believe fits the description. The Goodreads reviews assure me that this is going to stay a friendship story with no romance. I am trusting them to be right here. But I also wanted to make sure to include this in this video because this is the most recent release you're gonna get from me here. Everything else is gonna be older than this. This is a debut novel that came out last year. I'm reading it right now because I'm doing my Hugo reading, and this author is nominated for the Astounding Award for Best New Writer. This is a lighter historical fantasy novel set in like medieval-ish England. I say lighter historical because it does have this very contemporary feeling of the writing style and the dialogue. It's really not bogging you down with the historicalness of it all. The first-person protagonist here is a Jenny Greenteeth, which is a fae creature that lives in a lake. I'm about 80 pages in, and at this point, Jenny and a human witch and a goblin have all teamed up to go on a quest to defeat something scary and evil in the village, and there's a promise that they are going to meet more fairies and fae creatures along the way. I've seen other reviewers recommend this for fans of T. Kingfisher, and I do agree with that. It feels similar in writing style. Now, going all the way back from what I'm reading right now to something I read in my ancient youth is The Wee Free Men by Terry Pratchett. This is the first of the Tiffany Aching books, which are the sub-series of books for younger readers within the Discworld series. They start out a bit more middle grade and then end up a bit more YA. This particular sub-series of Discworld has a strong focus on the folklore elements. I was reminded of this while reading Greenteeth because this book does start with a brief encounter with a Jenny Greenteeth, but there are plenty of other fairy creatures in this as well, the wee free men of the title, and the main plot of this book revolves around a confrontation with the Queen of the Fairies. Continuing in the middle grade vein, I have to recommend the Fairyland series by Catherynne and Valente, starting with the girl who circumnavigated Fairyland in a ship of her own making. This series is from the 2010s. I was reading and loving them in the earlier years of my booktube channel. And I'd say the Fairyland of these books is less the kind of folkloric idea of fairy as a realm and more a whimsical portal fantasy world. That's kind of more the literary niche that this falls into. But it's a fairyland that's obviously filled with all types of fairy and folklore creatures. 5 books full of them if you read the whole series. And it's the sort of book where the whimsy meter is like dialed up to 10. And if you know me, you know I love an intensely whimsical read. So if you also love an intensely whimsical read, you haven't read these yet, what is stopping you? Now I want to talk about a few books that are less obvious in advertising their fairy content. The first is Tamsin by Peter S. Beagle. This is a book that is first and foremost a ghost story, and if you haven't read it, that might be all you think it is. But there's also an incredible amount of folklore in this. This is from 1999. It's a sort of book that would probably be published as YA today, except that YA in its current form didn't exist then. It's a coming-of-age story about an American girl who moves with her family to a house in the English countryside that turns out to be haunted by a ghost girl named Tamsin. In terms of the fairy and folklore elements, the Wild Hunt plays a significant role in this plot. There's also a puka, and there might be some other fairy-ish creatures in here, but I'm not really remembering the details. I remember the Wild Hunt and the puka. Now I'm including a couple books on this list that never actually call anything in the book by the name fairies or fae, but it's clear that's kind of what they are. I think it's more than kinda what they are in Cuckoo Song by Frances Hardinge. This is 100% a fairy book, even if we're calling them something else. Frances Hardinge is an author who writes books that kind of fall on the borderline between lower YA and upper middle grade, and that's kind of where this one sits as well. And I'm gonna tell you, I have already kind of spoiled the big surprise of this book by telling you that there is fairy stuff going on. So I'm sorry for that, but I also don't know how to recommend this book any other way than to spoil it just a little bit in one way or another. Because this is a book where you start out with absolutely no idea what's going on except something deeply unsettling is clearly happening. And then once you figure out exactly what variety of creepy fairy stuff it is, you've got much more of a bearing of what's going on in the story. But the fae and fairies in this are called something else, and I was flipping through the book trying to remember exactly what this book calls them. I couldn't find it, I'm sorry, but we all know what they are, right? Wink, wink. And then the other book that I want to recommend that's a little bit of a stretch because I don't think anything in this book is actually referred to as fae or fairies is The Butcher of the Forest by Premee Mohamed. This is a secondary world fantasy that involves a very dangerous, spooky, magical forest. And the quest story here involving a journey into this dangerous, magical forest otherworld is, to my mind, a quest into the realm of fairy narrative, even if we're not calling it that in this secondary world. To me, this has a lot of the hallmarks of a journey into the realm of fairy, where everything is dangerous and trying to play tricks on you, and it takes all of your wily wit to make it out alive. This is a standalone adult novella. It's the other newer book on this list. It was published, I think, 2 years ago in 2024. This is about a woman who is forced by her land's, conquering tyrant ruler to go on this very dangerous quest into this dangerous magic forest otherworld that we're not calling Faerie, to retrieve the tyrant's 2 children who have gone in there and gotten lost, because she is the only person who's been into the magic forest and come out again alive. And the thing that I think makes this book so good is that this is a creepy book. Like, all of the dangerous magic stuff in the forest, extremely creepy, but ultimately the most unsettling thing in the book is not the terrors that live in the forest. It's the terrors of the mortal world. The threat of what this tyrant can do to this woman if she says no or if she fails, what he can do to her and her family and everyone she knows and loves. I actually found the creepy stuff in the forest relatively tame in comparison, and I imagine that's kind of the point. You can face down all of the most nightmare-fueled terrors imaginable, and the worst thing you'll face at the end of the day might still be a bad human with too much power. My next book on this list is the book that I remember the least. My memory of this is not great, but it is Roses and Rot by Kat Howard, which was published in 2016, and that is the year in which I read it. This also might be the book on this list that I personally liked the least. I know I only gave this 3 stars, but I cannot quite remember why. This was Kat Howard's debut novel. She's an author whose short fiction I really like. I keep recommending her story collection, A Cathedral of Myth and Bone, to people because not enough people read that. I have not read her other novels, which are more popular than this. But this is a contemporary fantasy about 2 adult sisters, one of whom is a writer, the other is a dancer, who both go to this very elite artist retreat. And there is something creepy going on at this artist retreat. And obviously it is fairy stuff again, because that's the theme of the video. I remember this having elements of a Tam Lin retelling to it, although it's not advertised as such, but it's not a romance Tam Lin retelling because it's about the 2 sisters. That said, because this is the book on this list that I remember the least, I can't 100% promise you that all of the fairies in this book are completely unsexy. I just don't remember it that well, but I can tell you that this isn't romantasy by any of the definitions of romantasy I would use. It's also very definitely not young adult, although people have shelved it that way on Goodreads. Why? Why? And then I have saved for last the book that everyone who knows me well will have known was coming from the beginning of this video, because, obviously it's Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, right? And this is one of the all-time books for me on my channel, if you've been around here for any length of time. In case you've been living under a rock, this chonker is alt history, Regency fantasy, about the return of magic to England. And yes, it's a fairy book, and no, it is not a romance. Yes, it is extremely dense. Yes, it does have footnotes. It is super witty though. If this is your thing, you're gonna love this, and it's very much my thing. At least it was when I read it forever and ever ago, and I've been wanting to schedule a reread for years, and it hasn't happened. This is a book that has a really great slow build. The fae stuff in here is mysterious and beautiful and unsettling. If you are sitting through an entire recommendation video specifically on fae and fairy books that aren't romance, and you haven't tried this book to see if you get along with the writing style enough to read it, I highly recommend at least giving it a try. Not everyone who starts this book is gonna get along with it, and that's fine, but I think you should at least try it. So there you have it. That's the Unsexy Fairies book recs video. I want to say again what I said at the beginning, which is that I have nothing against sexy fairy books. I do enjoy a sexy fairy book on occasion. If I tried to make a recommendations list of those, though, I think it would be much shorter because there are many fewer of them that I actually like enough to recommend. But anyhow, let me know if you've read any of these, if you have any books that you want to recommend to me. I am still open to requests for that larger, hyper-specific book recommendations video that is still in the works. I will tell you, I have several kind of overlapping requests for like older characters, competent characters, female characters, older female characters, competent older characters, competent female characters. So if you have another request that doesn't overlap with that particular Venn diagram, drop it in the comments for me. SFF recommendation requests only though, because it's the only genre I talk about these days. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. I'm sad about the strap breaking on these wings. That's what I get for buying the cheap fairy wings from Spirit Halloween. That is all. Bye for now.